Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to the blistering deserts of ancient Persia, where your feet crunch over sun-baked stones and the air feels thick enough to chew. You trudge through narrow streets that shimmer with heat, the sun pressing down on your shoulders like a weighted blanket left out in the sun. Every breath tastes like dust and clay, and even the shadows seem to radiate warmth. You're sweating in places you didn't know could sweat. And the worst part? It's still morning. This isn't your average, open a window kind of heat. No, this is the kind of heat that melts your brain into a soft pudding and makes you wonder if you're being slow roasted for dinner. You squint ahead and wonder, how did people live here, build homes, raise kids, and wear full-length robes without spontaneously combusting? You probably won't survive this. Not without help. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of an ancient Persian city. Let's say it's Yazd. It's quiet, beige, beautiful, and hot. Buildings blend into the landscape like sandcastles left to harden. Roofs are flat, walls are thick, and above them rise strange towers, tall, boxy structures with open slats at the top. They look like chimneys or organ pipes, but instead of smoke, they breathe. Literally. They're called badger or wind catchers. And you're about to fall in love with them in the way only a sweaty traveler can. You wander closer. Everything about the street is designed for relief. It's narrow and shaded, winding like a lazy river through the city. High walls block the sun. Doors are small and low, inviting you into cooler spaces. A donkey ambles past you, looking entirely unbothered, because even the donkeys here know how to stay cool. A boy darts past, barefoot and grinning. He disappears into a wooden doorway draped with a damp cloth. You follow him, because you're curious and also because it's probably cooler in there. And just like that, you step into someone's house. Not that unusual, honestly. Persian homes are made to welcome, and hospitality is sacred. You pass through a small vestibule, and suddenly the temperature drops. Not dramatically, just enough to make your shoulders relax. The air smells of sun-warmed brick, pomegranate, and cool water. It's not magic. It's design. Thick walls, narrow entryways, shaded courtyards. And somewhere above, that wind tower is doing its quiet work. Historians still argue whether these badgers originated in Persia or Egypt, but one thing's clear. They found a perfect home in the scorching Iranian plateau. They're more than decorations. They're survival. You sit in the corner of the main hall. The boy's family is used to guests. They smile, bring you a copper cup of something tart and cold, maybe sharbat with mint and rose. You sip, and the cold hits your teeth like a small miracle. The room hums with quiet life. A fountain gurgles in the center, fed by a hidden channel beneath the floor. And there it is again, that cool breath from above. It brushes your cheek like night air, even though the world outside is baking. You glance up and see the open throat of the wind tower. No fan, no electricity, just air, flowing with purpose. You wonder, how? To understand, you step back outside and look again at the city skyline. Wind towers rise like sentinels above the roofs, each one catching wind from a different angle. Even on still days, the system works. That's the genius. If there's no wind, the air inside the house still rises, hot air always does, and as it escapes through the tower, cooler air is pulled in through lower vents or water channels. In other words, a natural vacuum. And guess what? They even combine them with cannons, underground water tunnels that run for miles beneath the city. More on that later. For now, you're walking through alleys again. The sun is higher now, cruel and proud. But you know the secret. You know that above many homes, invisible fingers of air are reaching down, cooling rooms with no wires, no buttons, just gravity and patience. You imagine living here. Waking early, before the heat settles. Preparing food, sharing tea, retreating inside when the sun reaches its peak. Maybe you nap beneath the tower, lulled to sleep by the soft hum of moving air and the tick-tick of water in a clay basin. And when the breeze shifts, the tower shifts with it. Multiple openings allow it to choose the best direction. You're not fighting nature here. You're dancing with it. Every structure in this city is a slow, quiet response to its environment. It's not flashy, but it works. Oh, and that quirky tidbit I promised? Some families trained cats to sleep on the vents, but their bodies responded to the tiniest air movements, so wherever the cat napped, that's where the breeze was. The original air conditioner remote, complete with purring. You chuckle or maybe just exhale a little deeper. You're still hot, sure, but now you're also deeply, oddly impressed. The desert still scorches outside. But inside these walls, thanks to clever towers, cold water, and maybe a lazy cat or two, you're doing just fine. You stand in the courtyard of the house, still not quite understanding how the air can feel so fresh in a place that should be sweltering. Your eyes drift upward to the windcatcher, the badger, towering gracefully like a silent guardian. Its design is simple, a tall rectangular structure with openings on each side. But behind its unassuming facade lies an architectural marvel that's been perfecting itself for millennia. Imagine this tower as a giant, highly sensitive nose attuned to the wind's direction. When a breeze blows from one side, the badger catches it, funneling the air downward into the rooms below. If the wind shifts, the tower adapts, its open sides redirecting airflow like a natural ventilation maestro. It's as if the structure senses your discomfort and decides to help. You step outside, climbing onto the rooftop for a better view. From this height, the cityscape unfolds, dotted with windcatchers standing like quiet, unassuming sentinels. No two are exactly alike. Some are slender, their crowns curved like regal headpieces. Others are octagonal. Persian architecture embraces elegance in variation, functional, yet undeniably beautiful. You approach a grand badger attached to a nobleman's home. An elderly man stands nearby, his face weathered like a riverbed map. He nods at you, then points to something remarkable, a small opening at the tower's base where cool air whispers through. He holds out his palm, and you feel it too. A genuine breeze, no fans required, even as the sun scorches the earth. And here's the real genius. The tower works in reverse too. When there's no wind at all, hot air inside the house rises and escapes through the tower's vents. This creates low pressure, pulling in cooler air from courtyards, wells, or shaded pools below. The result? A self-regulating, zero-energy air conditioner. Historians still argue whether badgers originated in Persia or evolved from earlier Egyptian ventilation shafts. Some theorize the concept may have existed in Mesopotamia, but Persia refined it. Others claim the first windcatchers appeared in Yazd over 3,000 years ago. Like all great historical debates, the truth remains hazy. But one thing's certain, it works, spectacularly so. The old man invites you to sit near the tower's airflow. He produces a clay water jug wrapped in damp cloth. The water inside is cooler than the ambient air. The badger helps keep it fresh, he says. You take a sip and feel reborn. As you sit, you study the tower's inner design. Wooden or stone baffles crisscross the shaft, not for decoration, but to slow and distribute the wind. Instead of a harsh gust, you get a steady, gentle flow, like a desert whisper. In the distance, a taller badger crowns the city's grand mosque. These towers weren't just for homes. They cooled mosques, hammams, public baths, and caravanserais along the Silk Road. King or merchant, everyone benefited. Here's the kicker. Wealthy homes often had multiple badgers, each facing a different wind direction. When breezes shifted, the right tower would activate, creating a passive, multi-source cooling system. No electricity, no noise, no carbon footprint. Another quirky detail? Some Persian cities integrated badgers with clock towers. Timekeeping and climate control merged seamlessly. As the sun dips, you descend the narrow stairs. Air still murmurs through the windcatcher. It's not refrigerator cold, of course. But in 40 degrees Celsius heat, every breath feels like a gift. You realize technology isn't always about buttons and screens. The best innovations often go unnoticed, working so harmoniously with nature that you forget they're there. The badger is proof that humans can thrive with their environment, not against it. You pause, watching Persia's horizon blush orange. The windcatchers now resemble slowly lit candles, silent yet alive. Below, life continues. Children splash in courtyard pools. A mother hangs damp fabric over a doorway, an extra cooling trick. And you? You simply sit and breathe. For the first time since arriving, you're not drenched in sweat. You wander deeper into the heart of the city, winding your way through narrow alleyways flanked by sun-bleached mud brick walls. The air is thick with the scent of baked earth, cardamom tea, and the distant sizzling of kebabs. But it's not as stifling as you expect. Overhead, you see the reason why: badgers, wind towers, jutting into the sky like sentinels, casting long shadows that dance across the rooftops. One particular house catches your eye. Not grand or extravagant, but older than you can guess, with faded mosaics along its outer wall and a quiet dignity in the way it stands. You step inside. The air greets you immediately, not cool like an air conditioner, but softer, more forgiving. Your eyes adjust to the dim interior, and you begin to notice something curious. There's a courtyard in the center, a typical feature of Persian homes, but the pool of water at its heart isn't just decorative. It's functional. The wind that flows through the badger travels downwards and glides across the surface of the water, picking up its moisture, becoming cooler, and then continuing into the living spaces beyond. You're not just feeling airflow, you're experiencing passive air conditioning, ancient style. And here's the kicker. Some of these systems were connected to underground aqueducts known as canets. Picture it: cool water flowing beneath the city in gently sloping tunnels, kept shaded and fresh, feeding both people and architecture. Some badgers were designed to draw not only air, but also direct that airflow across canet channels, intensifying the cooling effect. You could call it a form of natural refrigeration. No humming motors, no flickering LEDs. Just earth, wind, and water. Historians still argue whether badgers were more effective when combined with water elements or when used alone. Some say the combination was necessary only in more humid regions. Others believe the dual system was a standard of elite architecture. As with most ancient technologies, the truth likely varied by region, wealth, and the personal quirks of long-dead architects. You pause in a shaded hallway and notice the walls are unusually thick. They're made from adobe, a mixture of mud and straw, dried under the same sun that now blazes overhead. These walls are not just strong, they're insulating. They trap the cool of the night and release it slowly throughout the day. You put your hand on the plaster. It's surprisingly cool, like the underside of a stone in a forest. Moving further into the home, you see a wind shaft emerging from the ceiling. It's narrower here than it was at the top of the tower. That's deliberate. By constricting the airflow, the pressure increases slightly and creates a stronger breeze at face level. It's subtle, but you feel it as you sit near a faded silk cushion. Just a whisper of wind brushing past your cheek. This room you're in is likely a summer room, situated to receive the best breeze, often underground or semi-submerged. The walls are lined with intricate tile work in cobalt blues and ochre yellows. The patterns aren't just for beauty, they reflect light and help regulate temperature. Beauty and utility, woven together like threads in a Persian rug. And speaking of rugs, those too played a part. Thick wool in the winter, light cotton in the summer. Often soaked in rosewater or mint to scent the air. You imagine lying back on one now, the whispering breeze from the badger above lulling you into a relaxed daze. You could almost forget how blistering the sun is outside. A cat slips past you, tail high, making its way toward the shade. Even it seems to understand the architectural choreography at play here. These homes weren't just built. They were tuned, like instruments, designed to respond to sun, wind, and human needs in perfect synchrony. Some badgers even had wooden flaps or shutters, early manual air regulators. A resident could climb up to adjust the venting, choosing which direction of wind to allow in. It's not unlike setting your home fan from oscillate to direct, only you're climbing a ladder in your robes while balancing a lantern. Charming. Slightly dangerous. But effective. You notice a faint trickle of sound, water dripping. Somewhere behind a curtain, another small fountain bubbles softly. Not enough to make noise, just enough to remind you that life here revolves around the presence, or the illusion, of water. In a desert climate, that gentle murmur is as precious as gold. What's striking, you realize, is how quiet it all is. There's no machinery humming, no electric motors churning. Just wind moving through space, guided by the hands of architects long gone. You begin to understand why these structures have lasted so long. They're not fighting the environment, they're collaborating with it. You step back into the courtyard, letting the breeze from the badger follow you. You raise your arms, close your eyes, and just breathe. And as you do, a quiet realization settles in. Everything in this house, from the way it's built to the way it breathes, is designed to make you more comfortable without ever making a sound. You rise slowly from the cushions, letting one last breeze from the badger caress the nape of your neck. Stepping out of the cool house, you wander into the city streets. The sky blushes gold, shadows stretching long. Yet the air remains bearable, still quietly tended by windcatchers like elderly servants who never complain. Ahead looms a rectangular building with a flat roof. Not a home, but a hammam, the public bathhouse where ancient Persians cleansed, socialized, debated poetry, even arranged marriages. And of course, it too has its own cooling secrets. You enter. The transition feels magical, from dry brightness to a dim, humid hush. Above, multiple badgers stand sentinel, funneling air through chambers below, the hot room, warm room, cold room. The air moves like purposeful mist. Here's something fascinating. Some bathhouses used underground chambers as resting caves. Windcatchers guided air over stone walls and water pools, creating natural lounges where you could dry off without sweltering. The effect is subtle. No fans, no blasts, just cooling silence. Historians still argue whether public windcatchers were status symbols or genuinely functional. Some archaeological finds suggest not all badgers worked. Many were purely decorative. But here, form and function marry seamlessly. You trace the hammam's corridors. The walls glisten with steam, and you notice the tower's breeze doesn't rush in directly. It spirals. Architects knew harsh drafts would chill bathers, so they designed narrow channels to slow and soften the airflow before it reaches the main halls. By a small pool you pause. The water is still. The air isn't icy, but cool enough to relax your skin. Glancing up, you spot the badger's dust filter, a wooden or woven grate that strains desert sand from the wind. Of course, not all windcatchers performed equally. Poor design or shifting winds could render them useless. But most public buildings had multiple badgers, creating natural redundancy, a failsafe even modern ACs lack. In the corner, an old man fans himself with a palm leaf. He smiles, pointing upward. Wind here comes from the mountains, he rasps. Sometimes south, sometimes north. But it always finds its way in. You nod, he's right. Then you spot something peculiar, small floor vents. Not chimneys, but inverted ventilation shafts. Body heat rises and gets pulled into the tower's current. The room stays humid but never stifling. Every architectural element here pulls double duty. Sound, too, is deliberate. Vaulted ceilings and curved walls soften voices. Even distant speech feels like dream whispers. Unconsciously, you lower your own voice. This space forbids clamor. Nearby, a child sits cross-legged, watching a pigeon feather twirl in the airflow. Windcatchers aren't just technology, you realize. They're theater, performing daily for those who pause to notice. You exit as the sky deepens to violet. Yet the air remains serene. The bathhouse's badgers stand unwavering, greeting dusk with invisible labor. No opulence here, just steadfastness. They're not monuments to power, but to guardianship. Walking through the near-empty market, it strikes you. This cooling system wasn't an invention as we think of them today. It was a way of living, a symbiosis between humans and climate, between design and wind. One final breeze brushes your face as you turn toward your lodgings. And it occurs to you, if this city breathes, the badgers are its lungs. Silent, steady, alive. Word count, 1089. You are a scene selector and medieval illumination prompt writer. Goal: generate exactly 5 highly detailed Midjourney/stable diffusion ready prompts. Each prompt must depict a different, visually distinct moment or setting from the script extract supplied below. All prompts must share the same art direction: late 15th century illuminated manuscript miniature, tempera and shell gold on vellum, flat medieval perspective, limited depth cues, subtle parchment texture, delicate brown ink outlines, tiny gilded flourishes, no modern objects or techniques. Method: read the script section. Identify the most picturable beats, places, actions, or moods that occur in chronological order. Write 1 prompt per beat. Keep them varied. Interiors versus exteriors, day versus night, different characters, seasons, or activities. So the final sequence feels like a visual storybook of the text. Structure each prompt like this. Prompt X. Core scene description, key characters and actions, setting, mood, color accents, late 15th century illuminated manuscript miniature, tempera and shell gold on vellum, flat medieval perspective, fine brown ink outlines, subtle parchment texture, 16:9 aspect, ultra high resolution, 4K. Tips: use archaic clothing colors, indigo, russet, saffron teal. Mention small medieval props, wicker baskets, wooden buckets, iron fire tongs, when relevant. If weather matters, snow, rain, harvest sun, weave it in. Keep to 1 sentence per prompt. Avoid camera jargon beyond straight on or bird's eye. Output format list each prompt on its own line starting with prompt 1, prompt 2, up to 5. Do not add commentary, explanations, scene titles, or blank lines, only the prompts. Begin once the placeholders are filled. Script section. You make your way out of the hammam and follow a narrow path that leads away from the city center. The homes here grow simpler, lower, more spread out. The elegance of tile mosaics fades, replaced by plain, sand-colored walls, crumbling corners, and crooked wooden doors that creak even in the softest breeze. And yet, every few houses, another badger rises into the sky. Not as tall or ornate as those in wealthier areas, but still standing, still breathing. You stop and lean against one of these walls. It's warm, but not scalding. The shade it offers is already a form of mercy. And inside, you suspect, it's even better. So you push the door open. A family greets you, modest and smiling. They're preparing for the evening meal: bread, lentils, yogurt, herbs. The air inside is calm. It's not frigid, but there's a distinct softness, like the difference between stepping into cotton and burlap. Their wind tower isn't large, but it does the job. The father gestures upward and says, "Built by my grandfather." Still works. There's pride in his voice, not the kind that brags, but the quiet kind that lingers. You look around. No courtyard here, no fountains or cannons. But the same principles apply. The wind enters through the badger, travels down a long shaft, and circulates through the main living area. A small clay jar of water sits on a window ledge, sweating beads of moisture that help cool the breeze even further. Passive technology, aided by instinct. One of the daughters shows you a clay screen placed near the window. It's been dampened with water from a nearby well. The wind hits the screen and picks up the moisture as it passes through. It's rudimentary, but effective. You feel a wave of cool air brush across your hands. It's not luxury, it's ingenuity. Here's the fascinating part. This technique has a name, evaporative cooling, and it's still used today in modern cooling systems, especially in dry climates. But these Persians were doing it thousands of years ago with clay, water, and air. No electricity, no wiring, just a deep understanding of their environment. Historians still debate whether these clay chillers were a common innovation among the lower classes or something that trickled down from elite households. Some argue that rural Persians developed their own parallel cooling systems, distinct from urban technologies like cannets and tiled courtyards. Others believe these solutions spread gradually as builders shared techniques and adjusted for different regional conditions. The house has only 2 rooms, but the temperature difference is striking. One room faces the wind, the other doesn't. You notice how much more stifling the windless room feels, how the air clings to your skin instead of moving across it. And then it hits you. These people didn't just build structures. They studied wind like scholars. They knew when it would arrive, how it would shift, what obstacles would dull its force. They lived by the breeze. You step back outside and climb a small stone stairwell to the roof. The sun has dipped low now, and the shadows have softened. You look out across the flat rooftops, and the city feels like a quiet, breathing thing. The badgers sway slightly in the wind, their wooden vanes creaking gently. From here, they resemble sails on the deck of a grounded ship, all catching the wind, all navigating the desert together. A dog barks in the distance. A pot clatters in a nearby alley. But mostly it's quiet. The kind of quiet that allows you to hear the wind itself, hear the way it curves around buildings, squeezes through slits, and spills across stone floors like invisible water. You wonder how many generations have stood here at this same moment of the evening and felt this same peace. Then you notice something curious, a rooftop trapdoor. You open it, and a ladder descends into the room below, one not visible from the ground floor. A storage space? You descend and feel it, cooler, darker, and completely quiet. It's a wind room. Built into the roof but insulated from the heat, it allows the wind from the tower to flow directly downward and spread evenly before seeping into the rest of the house. You run your fingers along the walls. They're smooth, cool to the touch. This room was meant to breathe. It's almost funny. In the age of smart homes and AI thermostats, these ancient Persians had already figured out zoning, using architectural design to control airflow and temperature in different areas of a house. No code, no updates, just clay, stone, and wind. You hear the voice of the girl again from above. "Do you want tea?" she calls. You climb back up, smile, and sit on a mat woven from date palm leaves. The breeze is steady now, carrying the scent of mint from the kitchen below. You sip slowly and feel a strange sort of stillness settle into your bones. It's not just the tea. It's the rhythm of life here, built not around speed or noise, but around air, shade, and silence. In this moment, you realize that every home in this city is part of a larger machine. A network of wind and stone. A collective effort to tame the desert without fighting it. And while the towers may vary in height, shape, or material, they all serve the same purpose: to make life just a bit more bearable, one breeze at a time. The stars begin to peek through the darkening sky, and the last rays of gold fade from the horizon. The wind softens to a whisper, just enough to tickle your skin. You lean back and look up at the badger beside you, still standing, still catching breath from the heavens. You wake with the morning light just beginning to warm the rooftops of the old city. The breeze has shifted, softer now, gentler, but still present. The badger beside you stands motionless, its narrow slits humming faintly. You stretch, blink against the sunlight, and rise to your feet. Today, you're leaving the city center entirely. You've heard of a different kind of structure. A wind tower embedded in a caravanserai, one that serves not just a family, but entire processions of travelers. The thought intrigues you. Could these cooling marvels work at scale? Could they soothe not just rooms but entire courtyards filled with camels, spices, silk bundles, and men from 10 different languages? So you walk, following dusty trade routes until the domed roof of the caravanserai comes into view. Its massive, thick walls, arched gateways, and yes, a wind tower rising like a stone periscope above it all. A few merchants are still waking. A boy pours water onto the ground to settle the dust. And you're welcomed in like an old friend. Inside, the difference is stunning. Despite the rising sun, the air here remains surprisingly cool. Massive stone arches and clay brick floors help, but it's the wind tower, centrally placed and surrounded by an internal courtyard, that does the real work. You hear it before you feel it, a low, hollow sigh coming from the shaft. It spills into the gathering hall like an invisible guest. The tower here is quadrilateral, with openings on all 4 sides, designed to catch wind no matter which direction it comes from. You marvel at the geometry. 4 vertical channels, separated by partition walls, each facing a cardinal direction. If the north wind blows, it enters that channel. If it shifts to the east, the next one catches it. Ingenious. You stroll beneath the tower's base and look up. Light filters through latticework carved into the upper walls. The air here feels denser, not heavy like humidity, but full, charged with movement. A merchant waves to you from a corner, beckons you to join him for breakfast. Dates, flatbread, yogurt, and a small bowl of melon. You sit, and over a slow meal, you learn the tower's nickname, the Tower of Rest. Apparently, it's known by travelers across the Silk Road. You sleep beneath the tower, the merchant says, and your dreams are lighter. As you finish eating, he tells you a story, not written in any history book, of course. About a time when a sandstorm struck mid-journey, and this caravanserai saved his entire group. Without the tower, he says, we would have suffocated. It pulled in air when the world outside held none. You're not sure if that's physically accurate, but you let the poetry of it wash over you. You wander deeper into the complex. There's a bathhouse, a prayer room, and several private chambers meant for high-ranking guests. Each of them is angled just so the airflow from the tower can reach them with maximum efficiency. No fans, no ducts, just a perfect understanding of spatial orientation. You trace the path of the wind, feeling it touch your cheek, then vanish again into a shadowed corridor. And here's where it gets weird, in the best way. One of the chambers has ceramic pipes embedded in the walls, not for water, but for channeling air from the wind tower. Like early air vents, shaped by hand, glazed to reduce friction. Historians still argue whether these were standard features or luxury add-ons for wealthy guests. Some think they were experimental. Others believe we've underestimated how common this tech really was. You step into the room and instantly notice the difference. The air isn't just cooler, it's smoother, more focused. Like the wind has been trained to behave itself, to serve. The pipes create a kind of natural pressure gradient that guides air exactly where it's needed. You lie down on a woolen mat, and the breeze settles over you like a soft cloth. Another thing strikes you: the acoustics. The wind tower doesn't just cool the air, it reshapes sound. Everything here is quieter, gentler, as if the building itself is whispering. You hear your own breath more clearly, feel the rhythm of it matching the gentle thrum of the breeze. You could stay like this forever. But there's more to see. You rise, thank your hosts, and make your way up a narrow staircase to the top of the wind tower. From here, the view is astonishing. Not just because of the desert stretching to the horizon, or the line of camels slowly trudging toward it, but because of what the tower reveals. A network of similar structures in the distance, each one breathing in sync. The tower's internal chambers are accessible too. A small maintenance hatch reveals a series of wooden beams, tilted at calculated angles to redirect the wind. A merchant once told you these beams were scented with myrrh to freshen the air. You're not sure if that's true, but the idea lingers. Maybe cooling the air was just step one. Making it fragrant? That was Persian hospitality. Before descending, you place your palm on the tower's inner wall. It's warm, but not hot. The stone here has been kissed by wind for centuries, worn smooth by 1,000 invisible hands. You close your eyes and listen again. That low, ghostly hum. You think about modern architecture. How much of it relies on brute force? Compressors, condensers, cold air on demand. But this is harmony. A conversation between building and climate, between form and function, between need and nature. You descend slowly, your steps matching the rhythm of the breeze. By the time you reach the courtyard again, the shadows have grown longer. The travelers are preparing to leave, but you linger a moment longer, absorbing it all. The scent of tea leaves, the softness of the wind, the hush before the journey resumes.
You walk away from the caravanserai just as the sun begins to settle into its late afternoon angle, the sky deepening into a richer blue. The memory of the wind tower clings to you, its steady breath, its comforting hush. But you're curious now. If the Persians built towers for travelers and homes alike, what about the grandest buildings of all? What about palaces? Your sandals crunch on gravel as you make your way to one of the lesser-known ruins outside the city. An ancient Persian royal estate, partially restored, mostly forgotten. The guards let you in with a nod and a cup of something sweet, probably infused with saffron and rosewater. You sip it as you step through stone gateways into what was once a royal complex, complete with audience halls, private quarters, gardens, and yes, towering wind catchers that rise like vertical sails. Here, the wind towers are less about practicality and more about performance. They are taller, more ornately carved, with intricate muqarnas decorations under the slits, those honeycomb-like niches that catch the light like stalactites. You stare at one, and it almost feels alive. These aren't just air ducts, they're sculptures, status symbols. A ruler didn't just need to stay cool, he needed to do it with flair. And then you notice something fascinating. Unlike the boxy residential towers you've seen before, these palace badgers are hexagonal. 6 faces instead of 4. Why? Well, historians still argue whether this design was more effective or just more regal. Some say the extra faces allowed for finer control over airflow. Others believe it was about architectural symmetry and aesthetics. Either way, it's stunning. You duck into the cool shade of the palace's main audience chamber. The floor is stone, rubbed smooth by centuries of sandaled feet. Above, the air flows through angled vents, descending like a slow exhale. And in the very center, a shallow pool gleams with reflected light. That's not just for show. It's part of the cooling system. As air passes over the water, it picks up a tiny bit of moisture, dropping the temperature even further. No moving parts, no power grid, just evaporation and elegance. A curious attendant, more like a local history buff, spots you wandering and joins in with stories. He tells you about the royal summer gatherings held here. Entire feasts laid out under the canopy of cool air. Peacocks wandering the courtyard. Guests fanning themselves more out of habit than necessity. They say even the dates stayed fresh longer. He laughs. You suspect he's exaggerating, but part of you wants to believe it anyway. He leads you to one of the private chambers used by the nobility. The walls are thicker here, the ceilings lower. Insulation, perhaps? It traps the cool air, the attendant explains. And unlike the central halls, these rooms feature adjustable shutters at the base of the wind tower shafts. So not only could you direct the breeze, you could control its intensity. Like dimmer switches, but for air. And here's where things take a nerdy turn. Tucked behind the wind tower, you find a spiral staircase. Tight, steep, and perfectly ventilated. It spirals up the structure like a snail's shell, used by caretakers to clean or maintain the tower. But what's wild is what's etched into the walls. Faint lines, measurements, even little diagrams. You run your fingers over them. Were these blueprints? Sketches left by ancient engineers? Some experts think so. Others believe they were added centuries later, maybe during a restoration phase. But either way, it's a reminder that these structures weren't static. They were tuned, improved, tinkered with. They evolved. You pause at the top of the staircase, just under the cap of the tower, where the stone slats form delicate crescent openings. The air here is surprisingly strong. Even without moving a muscle, you feel refreshed. You close your eyes and imagine being one of the ancient architects, watching the wind shift and trying to capture it. Not trap it, not dominate it, but work with it. Then something catches your attention. A soft whistling sound. Not mechanical, not alarming. Just a melody the wind has chosen to make as it moves through the slats. You wonder, was that planned too? Was acoustics part of the design? Did the Persians build towers that sang? You wouldn't put it past them. They were astronomers, poets, engineers. Why wouldn't they make a wind tower that could hum a lullaby? Descending again, you notice that even the stairwell stays cool. The tower isn't just catching wind. It's creating convection currents, moving hot air up and out while dragging cool air in below. You step outside and feel it immediately. The courtyard is warmer, brighter, and less forgiving. It makes the palace feel like an oasis, not just of architecture, but of atmosphere. You sit for a while on the palace steps, watching a bird ride a gust between towers. The shadows stretch long now, draped across the stone like lazy cats. Somewhere, a garden is being watered. You hear the quiet splash of irrigation channels doing their timeless work. And you think, this is what cooling used to mean. It wasn't a war against heat. It was a dialogue, a delicate agreement with nature. You give the wind a place to dance, and it rewards you with comfort. The modern world might call this passive cooling. But to you, it feels like something else entirely. Feels like listening. The city greets you once again, not with the clamor of modern life, but with a softened hush that arrives with nightfall. Lamps flicker in alleys, casting golden halos on walls still exhaling cool air. You step through narrow streets and realize something strange. Even without noticing, you've been walking in comfort. The heat of the day has vanished, not just because the sun has set, but because the architecture has been doing its quiet job all along. Here, in the heart of Yaz's old quarter, the wind towers become a skyline. Dozens of them poke up from flat rooftops, their forms as iconic as minarets or domes. Some lean slightly with age. Others have been lovingly restored with new wood, fresh plaster, or repainted bricks. A few are completely modern reconstructions, new towers for a new century, and somehow they all blend in. You duck into a rooftop cafe, drawn by the smell of cinnamon tea and the low hum of conversation. The host waves you toward a seat near the edge, where you can see the full sprawl of the old city and its sea of badgers, each one a silent sentinel of airflow. There are no ceiling fans here, no air conditioners, just the open sky, the quiet tower above you, and the breeze funneling through like a sigh of relief. You sip your tea slowly and eavesdrop on a group of young architecture students chatting nearby. One of them points to the skyline and says, "It's not about the past. It's about resilience." Another adds, "And beauty. You don't need to choose one." Their professor, perhaps the same man who dragged them into the desert on a field trip earlier, explains how wind towers are being studied again, not just as heritage but as solutions. "We're designing hybrid systems," he says. "Wind towers with solar-powered vents. Buildings that breathe again." You perk up. That sounds like progress with perspective. And then the conversation shifts toward technical matters. One student asks how wind towers work in humid climates. The professor nods solemnly. That's the catch. Wind towers perform best in arid regions. In humidity, the evaporative effect weakens. That's why they're regional. But then he adds something you find oddly moving. But maybe that's the lesson. Don't fight the climate. Design with it. You finish your tea and wander back down into the labyrinthine alleys. Each turn is lined with centuries of intention. You begin to see the patterns more clearly now. the way homes are angled, how alleyways snake and twist not randomly, but in harmony with the sun and wind. This isn't a grid, it's a dance floor for air. And as you walk, your mind drifts to the future. Could a city like this scale? Could modern skylines make room for towers of wind and whisper again? Some architects say yes. Already, wind-inspired systems are being trialed in office complexes in Abu Dhabi, university buildings in Singapore, and eco-resorts in Morocco. Steel and glass with a memory of clay. Historians still debate how much the Persian wind tower influenced other ancient systems. Did the Roman atrium, a central courtyard with a vented roof, borrow the idea? Did the mashrabiyah screens of Cairo and Damascus evolve from similar principles? Some even argue that parts of Indian Haveli architecture were Persian ideas carried east by trade and conquest. And while the trail is murky, the principle remains. Letting buildings adapt to their world, not the other way around. You pass a mural of a wind tower painted on a crumbling wall, modern graffiti looping around its base. Someone scrawled the words, "Cool air, old wisdom." You smile, but then you hear something different, a faint rattling noise. Curious, you follow it to a wind tower that's clearly out of use. Its upper vents are sealed, its shaft blocked by wooden boards. The rattling comes from a plastic fan, half installed and already rusting. A failed upgrade, a reminder that not every attempt to blend old and new succeeds. But it also proves something important. People are still trying. You circle back to the guest house where you started your journey. Its central courtyard glows in soft lantern light. The pool reflects stars. The air is still cool, thanks to the tower above, still working after all these years. You lie back on a cushion and listen. The wind tower makes no grand announcement, no dramatic hiss or hum, just a slow exhale, like a story told by someone who never raised their voice. And in that silence, you realize these towers aren't just about cooling the body. They're about cooling the mind, about creating spaces where rest isn't a luxury. It's built into the walls, the ceiling, the very design of your shelter. A child giggles somewhere in the next courtyard. A breeze carries the scent of mint and dry brick. You feel your heartbeat slow, and you think, no matter how modern the world becomes, there will always be value in what came before. Not everything old needs to be replaced. Some things, like wind towers, just need to be heard again.
The sun slips below the horizon now, casting a warm violet hue over the rooftops as twilight settles across the Persian plain. You're still at the palace, but the crowd has thinned. The air grows cooler not just from the falling temperature but from the still churning breath of the wind towers. Somehow, the towers feel more alive in the evening, less utilitarian, more ethereal. Their silhouettes reach skyward like quiet guardians of air and shade. As you begin to walk again, you wonder, what happened to these towers over time? Were they forgotten, torn down, left behind in favor of something newer, louder, better? Or did they quietly endure, tucked into villages and courtyards, still huffing and puffing their timeless lullabies? You leave the palace grounds and follow a dusty path toward a small town tucked behind a hill. The buildings here are humbler, the towers less ornate, but they're still there. Some are crumbling, others propped up with wooden braces. And yet, they still function. A thin stream of cool air flows from one as you pass beneath it. An elderly woman sits by the entrance, shelling pistachios and nodding at you. "We never stopped using them," she says, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. She invites you in, not for tea this time, but to show you something older than memory. Inside her home, the walls are thick adobe, and the air feels like the inside of a cave, cool, dry, peaceful. The wind catcher is smaller than the ones in the city, but just as purposeful. A narrow shaft lined with rough brick, patched in places with cloth and mud. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to work. And it does. She taps on the wall beside the shaft, then pulls away a wooden panel to reveal a clay jug nestled in a nook. "Cool water," she smiles. The wind passes over the jug, chilling the water inside even further. No need for a fridge. You take a sip. It's crisp, earthy, and somehow sweeter than anything you've tasted all day. And that's when it hits you. These aren't just relics. These towers aren't ancient tech waiting to be studied, they're living traditions. Passed down like recipes or lullabies. They didn't disappear, they just stopped being fashionable. Your host goes on, telling you how in the 1960s, her father resisted installing electric fans. "Why pay for what the wind gives freely?" she says with a laugh. "Besides, they're noisy." She has a point. You notice how deeply quiet her home is, just the whisper of air, the occasional creak of beams, a distant donkey braying somewhere. You sit with her for a while, the room growing darker and cooler. She lights a small oil lamp and sets it near the floor. You remember from earlier that warm air rises, so the placement is intentional. The cool air from the tower sinks, while the lamp's heat is gently pulled upward and out, never stifling the room. It's brilliant in its simplicity. A choreography of air, heat, and light. And for centuries, it required no switches, no blueprints, no smart sensors. Just an understanding of the elements and a willingness to build with, not against, them. You ask if people still build wind towers today. She nods. In the south, near Yazd. Some new houses have them again. Tourists love it. Architects too. But then she sighs. Most young people want air conditioning now. They don't trust old things. That might be true, but it's also changing. You think of cities choking under heat domes, of blackouts and rising energy costs. Of people starting to ask different questions. How did our ancestors live with heat, rather than trying to eliminate it? What did they know that we've forgotten? You step back outside and look up. The stars are beginning to show. Above the old town, the towers are outlined in starlight, each one a silent exclamation mark on the past. You imagine these towers not as backward artifacts, but as blueprints for the future, timeless solutions waiting to be re-understood. Historians still argue whether the use of wind towers originated exclusively in Persia or evolved simultaneously in parts of Egypt and the Arabian Peninsula. Some believe the concept migrated eastward into India and westward toward the Mediterranean, even influencing Moorish architecture in Spain. Others point to archaeological remains in the Persian Gulf that predate them all. The debate continues, but the result is the same: towers that turn air into comfort without burning a single drop of oil. You make your way slowly back toward the city, the air still whispering against your skin. You pass more towers, some chipped, some patched, but all upright. Some catch the wind sideways now, thanks to shifts in urban structure, but they still function. You begin to recognize them by silhouette, like old friends in a crowd. And suddenly, you realize something you hadn't noticed before. There's no uniform design. No two wind towers are exactly alike. They were always adapted, to the angle of prevailing winds, to the needs of the family inside, to the shape of a neighborhood or a courtyard. They weren't mass-produced. They were crafted, tuned, like instruments. Which means every tower is a story, a compromise, a collaboration between builder, weather, and air. You pass one last home before reaching the city gates, and the scent of saffron and roasted eggplant drifts toward you. A family is having dinner under the open sky, right beside their own wind tower. Laughter carries through the breeze. You smile and take one final deep breath, feeling the air move through you, cool, dry, ancient. Tomorrow, maybe, there will be wires and buttons again. But tonight, you sleep with the wind. The city greets you once again, not with the clamor of modern life, but with a softened hush that arrives with nightfall. Lamps flicker in alleys, casting golden halos on walls still exhaling cool air. You step through narrow streets and realize something strange. Even without noticing, you've been walking in comfort. The heat of the day has vanished, not just because the sun has set, but because the architecture has been doing its quiet job all along. Here, in the heart of Yazd's old quarter, the wind towers become a skyline. Dozens of them poke up from flat rooftops, their forms as iconic as minarets or domes. Some lean slightly with age. Others have been lovingly restored with new wood, fresh plaster, or repainted bricks. A few are completely modern reconstructions, new towers for a new century. And somehow they all blend in. You duck into a rooftop cafe, drawn by the smell of cinnamon tea and the low hum of conversation. The host waves you toward a seat near the edge, where you can see the full sprawl of the old city and its sea of badgers, each one a silent sentinel of airflow. There are no ceiling fans here. No air conditioners. Just the open sky, the quiet tower above you, and the breeze funneling through like a sigh of relief. You sip your tea slowly and eavesdrop on a group of young architecture students chatting nearby. One of them points to the skyline and says, "It's not about the past. It's about resilience." Another adds, "And beauty. You don't need to choose one." Their professor, Perhaps the same man who dragged them into the desert on a field trip earlier explains how wind towers are being studied again, not just as heritage, but as solutions. We're designing hybrid systems, he says, wind towers with solar-powered vents. Buildings that breathe again. You perk up. That sounds like progress with perspective. And then, the conversation shifts toward technical matters. One student asks how wind towers work in humid climates. The professor nods solemnly. That's the catch. Wind towers perform best in arid regions. In humidity, the evaporative effect weakens. That's why they're regional. But then he adds something you find oddly moving. But maybe that's the lesson. Don't fight the climate. Design with it. You finish your tea and wander back down into the labyrinthine alleys. Each turn is lined with centuries of intention. You begin to see the patterns more clearly now. The way homes are angled, how alleyways snake and twist not randomly, but in harmony with the sun and wind. This isn't a grid. It's a dance floor for air. And as you walk, your mind drifts to the future. Could a city like this scale? Could modern skylines make room for towers of wind and whisper again? Some architects say yes. Already, wind-inspired systems are being trialed in office complexes in Abu Dhabi, university buildings in Singapore, and eco-resorts in Morocco. Steel and glass with a memory of clay. Historians still debate how much the Persian wind tower influenced other ancient systems. Did the Roman atrium, a central courtyard with a vented roof, borrow the idea? Did the mashrabiyah screens of Cairo and Damascus evolve from similar principles? Some even argue that parts of Indian Haveli architecture were Persian ideas carried east by trade and conquest. And while the trail is murky, the principle remains, letting buildings adapt to their world, not the other way around. You pass a mural of a wind tower painted on a crumbling wall, modern graffiti looping around its base. Someone scrawled the words, "Cool air, old wisdom." You smile. But then you hear something different, a faint rattling noise. Curious, you follow it to a wind tower that's clearly out of use. Its upper vents are sealed, its shaft blocked by wooden boards. The rattling comes from a plastic fan, half installed and already rusting. A failed upgrade. A reminder that not every attempt to blend old and new succeeds. But it also proves something important. People are still trying. You circle back to the guest house where you started your journey. Its central courtyard glows in soft lantern light. The pool reflects stars. The air is still cool, thanks to the tower above, still working after all these years. You lie back on a cushion and listen. The wind tower makes no grand announcement, no dramatic hiss or hum. Just a slow exhale. Like a story told by someone who never raised their voice. And in that silence, you realize, these towers aren't just about cooling the body. They're about cooling the mind. About creating spaces where rest isn't a luxury, it's built into the walls, the ceiling, the very design of your shelter. A child giggles somewhere in the next courtyard. A breeze carries the scent of mint and dry brick. You feel your heartbeat slow. And you think, no matter how modern the world becomes, there will always be value in what came before. Not everything old needs to be replaced. Some things, like wind towers, just need to be heard again.